Gems.
Hey, Gems, it's your favorite sisters here, Stephanie.
And Kedna, thank you for tuning in to Exclusive Gems podcast.
Thank you.
Yes, I hope you guys are all feeling amazing today. So, in today's topic, we're going to be speaking about disciplining children. And this popular discussion was chosen on Instagram. If you actually go on our Instagram, you will see this as well. And this woman says, I seen a video of a mom saying she doesn't hit or yell at her child because she thinks about the future. And if she hits and yells at her because she loves her and wants her to correct her behavior, then what will she tolerate from a partner? I'm going to let that sink in because I've realized that this has actually been a very trendy topic currently all over social media platforms about whether or not parents should discipline their children. I am not going to tell somebody what to do with their child. That's not my scoop. That's not my niche. I don't do that. But me personally, and mind you guys, I don't have any kids, as you guys know. But when I do decide to have children, I don't want to beat them. And as you know, beating, whooping, disciplining them, patting them. And I also don't want to yell at my children either. So I definitely 100% agree with this post, with this discussion we're going to have. Because with that type of way to discipline your child, I don't think it's positive. I am a very positive reinforcement type of person. That's what I agree with. That's what I acknowledge. And my sister and I, we grew up getting beatings. So don't get it twisted. Like very old school Caribbean parents, especially my father used to beat the heck out of us. But what did it actually do? For me personally, I feel like as a child, it didn't do anything but bring fear, instill fear in me. And I was afraid to talk to my parents. I was afraid to um feel like I would get that type of reaction from them. I didn't want them to react that way with me. So a lot of the things that have happened to me, I held it from them. I mean, my father left early on, a little bit later on in my childhood, but still, it was that's the same for both of them. And I don't think we've ever went past that. Like it's still kind of the same thing. It's a fear of abuse, honestly. It's a fear of abuse. Rather, it is emotionally, it's physically, whatever the case may be, it's a form of abuse. And I think it does a lot of harm. It does more harm than good when you beat your child, when you yell at them, you don't properly communicate with them. You're not, it's not efficient. It's just not efficient to me. What do you think, sis?
A few months back, so it's funny that we're doing this discussion. I actually really like this discussion. It really made me see different, it really makes me see the different types of mindsets when it comes to parents because I did have this conversation with parents. So, Kidna, I do want to ask you before I give my point of view, what would you say is the best way to discipline your child?
I believe the best way to discipline a child is to speak to them.
So,
Mhm.
what if that doesn't work?
Then you can do things like take things away from them, like take away their phones, TV time, just basically take away things that they really enjoy doing.
What if that still doesn't work?
I don't think that will not work.
That's you can't say because every child is different, and this is one of the conversation like the conversation that I had because honestly, I'm very much like you. You guys know that I have two small little girls that I raise, and I am the same way. I do not like to spank my children. I don't like to beat them. I'm all for talking to my children and taking things away. So when I went into this conversation with someone else, another parent, that is the mindset that I had. Like, no, you don't have to beat your child. You can speak to them, you can take things away, and that'll work. It works for my children. So, I'm like, it'll work for any child. But then this parent brought it to my attention that that doesn't work for every child. Yes, you can talk to them. Yes, you can take things away, but that doesn't stop the child from reacting negatively towards you. And my um mind, in my opinion, I just thought, okay, well, maybe you just haven't been doing it long enough, and you just need to keep reinforcing, keep talking, keep taking things away until they kind of, conform. And I was told by the same individual like that, no, there are some things that work for certain children. So for some children, yes, you can talk to them, yes, you can take things away, and that'll work as a discipline. But there are some children where that won't work. No matter if you take things away, if you talk to them, they are still going to I don't want to say be bad, because I feel like that's it, calling children bad is so like it's just a icky thing to do, in my opinion. But it still doesn't stop them from behaving the way that we want our children to behave, which is in a proper manner. So that's when that actually really had me thinking, because in my mind, like I said, it works for everybody. But I also remember I used to babysit um some children and I would try to implement that same disciplinary action that I do with my kids, where like, talking to them and taking things away. I mean, no, they were not my kids, so I'm sure it held less substance, but at the same time, I feel like it should hold some type of substance. Like, okay, for example, one of the kids that I was watching would literally jump on my dining room table and then hop off, or try to kick the wall and bounce themselves off of the wall. So like they would end up hurting themselves, and I don't want anybody's child hurting themselves on my watch. So I would, talk to them like, hey, you can't do things like that, or oh well, if you're gonna do that, I'm gonna have to stop you from watching TV. If you're gonna do that, then you're gonna have to go in timeout. Or and even timeout is a bad thing to do, you know? So it at the end of the day, it was kind of like, what do I do? What do I do? Obviously, I cannot spank this child because it's not my child. So the only thing I can do is enforce the type of disciplinary action that I do enforce with my own children, but even that didn't work. So in those instances where talking to your child doesn't work and taking things away from your child doesn't work, what do you do?
I like how you use an example, but I would like to say there's a few questions I have, questions and concerns. So, to that individual that you were speaking to, what I would have asked is, okay, well, did you start off disciplining your child in that manner? Because once you do, you really can't, it's really hard to go back from that. You can't beat your child from since they can remember, and then all of a sudden you want to change your parenting style. Like, it's just not going to work,
I
right?
disagree, because that
So,
that was me in the beginning. I used to beat my I used to spank my eldest child. It's as I grew and as I did more research and learned more, I realized that that wasn't like the best way to discipline your child. So I switched up my parenting style, and I mean it works. I'm sure my children would rather get things taken away than to get beaten.
okay, let me ask you, what age did you stop beating Anaya?
She was, I believe it was like 4 or 5, around that age.
Okay, I can see that, but it worked for you though. That doesn't mean it's
Yeah,
going to work for everybody else.
that's
A lot of
true.
Yeah, so a lot of children are just like, "Oh, you're speaking to me now? This is nothing. I used to get beat." So of course they're not going to cooperate with that. And if a child is used to getting beat, like at the end of the day, they're going to be like, "This is the worst that can happen to me. What's the worst
Mm,
that can happen than getting beat?" Like that was the worst. So, and it's funny because a lot of children actually just get used to the beating and it's nothing to them.
that's
And then
true.
what are you going to use now? So that's why it's important. Well, that's the first thing. That's why it's important for you to implement a healthy um, relationship with your children. It also has to do with the relationship you have with your child as well. And a lot of parents, they will say that their child is stubborn, their child doesn't want to listen. But who is that child reflecting?
Oh wow, that's a good
Because
one.
at the end of the day, our children reflects us. So I feel like you should be looking at yourself internally. If you are having that type of issue with your child, you should figure out what's going on with you. because you can't say, oh well, some children well, it's better to beat them, and some children it's better to speak to them. I honestly can't agree with that. I feel like people in general, like at the end of the day, children are small adults.
Yeah,
All of us would rather being spoken to than being beat. If
of
I'm with my
course.
partner, would I rather my partner beat my behind or speak to me? Like, no,
That's
speak to
true.
me. So that's just a few questions I would ask that person. Like, okay, well, you know, are you trying to reverse something that you already started? Because that makes a big difference. Or is it
Hmm.
something that you've been doing and it just never worked? And on top of that, it's just like if you're speaking to your child and your child's not listening, how are you speaking to that child? Because although you might not be abusing them physically, people abuse people all the time verbally. So maybe
That's
you're
true.
verbally abusing that child and they now have no respect for you. They don't even care and they're lashing out. Why is your child lashing out if you're the parent and they're supposed to respect you?
When it comes to the type of disciplinary action that we're talking about, boundaries have a lot to play in it because you have to teach your children boundaries.
I agree.
And that's one thing that I absolutely had to learn because if you don't set those boundaries, then you are going to, yeah, your children are going to drive you wild. I promise you. So you just have to make sure that they understand there are some things that is okay to do and there are some things that is not okay to do, but those boundaries have to be set from the beginning. And you know what? Even if it's not set from the beginning, as soon as it is caught, you set those boundaries. Hey, this is okay and this is not okay. If you do this, which is not okay, this is what's going to happen. This is the disciplinary action that I have to take. It doesn't have to be beating, obviously. Um, it could be, okay, well, if you do this when you know you're not supposed to, then I'm gonna take your phone away. If they don't have a phone, then you take away TV time. You just take away things that they like to do, and give the only thing that they will be left with is things that they don't necessarily like to do. Like for example, my eldest, she loves to read, and they both love watching TV. Who doesn't love watching TV? So I'll take away TV time, and if I have to, I'll take away her book. She enjoys
Exactly.
reading. So if she does something that she's not supposed to do and all her TV time is gone, then you got to give me your book. So it's all about finding, because once they're bored and they actually have time to think about what they did and why they're not able to indulge in the things that they love to do, then they're really gonna be like, dang, I don't want to keep messing up. I don't want to keep doing that because I want to be able to have my phone. I want to be able to watch TV, play video games, read my book.
Yes, I love that. And I think another thing, I kind of want to bounce off of what you're saying, sis. I think another thing that's very important is also expressing to the child why we do not want them to do this and
Yeah.
the effect of their actions too. Like I think a lot of parents, which I've seen before, they will just say, "I do not want you to do this," and the child's like, "Well, why?" Because of course, children ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
They don't always know why, and the parent just like, "Well, I just don't." You
Because
have
I
to,
said so.
yeah, like
That's
that. It's
not an
just,
answer.
yeah, just very like brushing them off the shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
I am an advocate for speaking to children like they're
Yeah.
adults. Like, of course, there's some conversations, you have to wait till the child gets a certain age, whatever the case may be. But children are young adults. They understand things way more than we realize, or they will comprehend it when we speak to them and they're like, okay, I get it because they're of this world.
That's
So
true.
that's something big for me. I don't know if you guys believe in reincarnation, all of that. You're just reminding the child of who they are, okay? And I also wanted to make a good point about how I like what you were saying, sis, how you basically is like, hey, if you are doing this and you're upsetting me, this is the repercussion of your actions. This is what will happen. This is the effect. When you really think about it, as Homo sapiens, this is how we communicate all of the time. This is how we
Mm-hmm.
communicate with each other. This is how adults communicate. This is how you communicate with your dogs. This is how we communicate with all living things. So, why do we feel like it has to be different with children? Why do we feel like we have to take the initiative to be like, over the child with a belt? Like, we're some type of some type of
Animals.
yeah, like and it is crazy. Some people treat their children like this, and they don't even treat their dogs like this.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I actually, when I was having this conversation with a couple of other people, I brought up the idea of slavery. Like, why
Mm-hmm.
is it that we beat our children? And I feel like I read this somewhere else, but I'm not 100% sure. But from what I can remember, I read something along the lines of, I mean, what type of people do you typically see beating their children? Like, what type of
Yes,
people do you
I
typically see
love your
spanking their
mentioning
kids?
this.
Yeah, it's typically African Americans
Mm-hmm.
who does things like that. Like the majority is African Americans. From what, I guess is known. It's known that African Americans beat their kids, and the Caucasian people typically don't. Caucasian people typically
Yeah.
talk to their children. So where do
Honestly,
you think?
it's when you look at people who have enslaved backgrounds, that's who
Yeah,
beat their children.
yeah, that's true. So that's where we get that mentality from. It kind of just trickled down from years prior to being oppressed. So now we feel like, okay, to get our children to listen to us, we have to beat them just like we were getting beat as slaves, so that we
Mm-hmm.
can listen to our masters.
Yeah.
So we just have to stricken ourselves away from that type of mindset, and we have to remember, like you said, Kidna, like children are literally, we are here to guide them. Like when children come down here, they literally pick you to be their parents, they pick you to be their guides. So be that for them. You're literally there to guide them through life. You're not there to be their masters. You're not there to control them. You're not there to tell them to do things for you. You are there to guide them. You are there to raise them into wonderful little beautiful souls that is going to take on the world as they should.
Yes, and I love that you said that. And let's talk about a lot of the times how parents take out their frustration on their children.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
what tends to happen is that you're beating the child, but you're not even frustrated and angry at them. You're frustrated at your boss. You're frustrated and angry at your wife or whatever the case may be, your in-laws. You're not even mad at your child. So that's something else we have to keep in mind too, because how many times we've gotten a beating and way too hard for what you did.
Mhm.
Like
But
you're like
honestly, I do want to say that you should never, if you do decide to use spanking as your form of disciplinary action, that is your business. That's not my business. That's just not how
so
I raise my children. But if you do decide to do that, then you should never, ever, ever spank your children while you are mad. It doesn't matter who you're upset at, even if it's your child. You should never beat your child when you're upset at them. You should wait until you cool off. When I did used to beat my children, well, Anaya, my eldest, is like right before I stopped spanking her, is I would talk to her like, I would not, she would do something that I would get upset over. And one thing we have to remember is that nobody else is in control of the way that we feel. We are in control of the way that we feel. So even if something happens that upsets you, that is not that person that upsets you. It is you. Something triggered inside of you, and that is
oh,
why you are upset. So you should never
exactly.
say that my children or my kid made me upset or you made me do this. No, because all you're teaching them is to not take responsibility for how they are feeling. And you
Yes.
have to remember that you are here to guide. That's not what we want. We don't want another human being in the world that is unwilling to take responsibility for their emotions. So that's number one. But if you do decide on beating your children, like I said, that is up to you, but do not do it while you're upset. Wait till you cool off, and then you speak to them and you say, "Hey, I have to give you a spanking. This is why I have to give you a spanking because you did this. I did not like that you did that, so therefore I have to spank you. Do you understand?" Do you spank them? You give them a spanking, whatever, and then afterwards you hug them. You hug them and you ask them, "Hey, do you have any questions? I love you, but I do have to spank you because of whatever it is." And I guess that kind of goes back to the discussion, to the post where it says that you shouldn't beat your child because you love them, because you care about them. But I feel like that would be the most effective way of doing it if you were to do it,
Mhm.
instead of beating them out of anger and then just sending them off to their room, or beating them
Yes.
and then asking them, why are you crying? Like, what, you just hurt me.
Exactly.
Why else would I be crying, you know?
Yeah. Initially, that is to instill fear in your child, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what and that's why I disagree with that way of disciplining your child. Because why would you want your child to fear you? Why would you,
Exactly.
if you're supposed to be the safe place, you're supposed to be the safe haven for your child, when you still fear your children, you are no longer their safe place. Their home is no longer their safe place.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're looking for that external validation from other people, because the one person that's supposed to love them through everything and be there for them and shelter them, is the same person hurting them. Is the
Yeah.
same person abusing them. Don't get me wrong, I've seen parents lightly tap their children. Okay, fine. But I'm talking about the parent that gets the belt, get different
Get the
items from,
switch.
yeah, from the
Yeah.
household,
Mm-hmm.
smack their child, punch their child, because there's some people who does discipline their children like that. They'll smack them and punch them.
It's
I do
terrible.
not agree with that. It's wrong. Like I said, I'm not going to tell you how to raise your children, but how does that even make sense? Would you like to be slapped around? Us
Mm-hmm.
adults, we mess up all of the time.
Imagine if there was
So
somebody there just slapping you and
exactly.
punching you when you made a mistake.
Exactly. In the moment someone's doing that, you're in an abusive, toxic relationship and you're trying to get away. So a lot of us wonder why our children don't want to stay home with us. Now they're in the streets.
That's true.
They don't have a safe haven. And I think that's the biggest issue in our community, is our children don't have safe havens. They don't have anyone to speak to. They can't speak to their own parents.
Yeah,
It's wrong, and it causes a lot of issues in their adulthood.
it does. It causes distress. It now gives them something to heal. Like
Hmm.
as an adult, like there are so many things that I'm unpacking and healing from my childhood as a 27-year-old now. Like it's you don't want to cause trauma,
Exactly.
especially if you know it's going to cause trauma. Spanking, I feel, this is my opinion, causes trauma within your child. There are other ways to speak to tell your child that you don't like when they do something, because just like Kidna said, all it does is instill fear. And what do you think that does? What do you think that fear does? It now all they're gonna do is try to find ways around doing this without you finding out.
Hmm.
They're just
It
gonna
turns
try
them
to be
sneaky.
sneaky.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, would you rather your child to be sneaky and doing things that you don't want them to do anyway behind your back? Because now you just don't know. Or would you rather them come to you and be able to talk to you about these things that they want to do? And then like once you speak with them and you guys both have an understanding, maybe it's why you don't want them to do it, or maybe you'll have an understanding of why they want to do it, but and then you guys can maybe come to a compromise. You can
Exactly.
compromise with your children. Just because they're child doesn't make them less than. And that's one of the biggest things that I honestly have seen with parents around me, is that they see their children as less than. And honestly, I feel like even in our household, Kidna, we went through that where our parents seen us as less than. Like we were not equal to them. And no, your child is not exactly equal to you, because you're supposed to be taking care of the child, but they are as equal as a human being as you are. So why can't you
Yeah.
speak to them?
Exactly. And the funny thing about that type of parenting style, when you think you're above your child, like some type of godly complex, is that that dynamic never necessarily changes. Your parents still feel like that. And that just causes not so great of a relationship, even in
Strained
the adult,
relationship.
yeah, a strained relationship, even in the adulthood. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something to keep in mind as well, because not only you're doing this to your child, and just imagine, like, this person's going to be like, yeah, I remember when you used to beat my behind. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
something you never forget. And I'm not
Nope.
saying that child is going to hold it against you, but at the end of the day, we're still going to remember. And that can be another reason why, if you're an older adult listening to this, or whatever, your kids are a bit older, why there's some type of disconnection between you and your child. I also wanted to mention that I kind of wanted to say this here, that I see is on psychologytoday.com, that speaks about hitting your child, the psychology of it. And I'm going to read it verbatim. Not only does hitting kids do little good, it can worsen their long-term behavior. Children who experience repeated use of corporal punishments tend to develop more aggressive behaviors, increased aggression, and an increased risk of mental health disorders and cognitive problems. So we see how this affects a child into their adulthood. Who knows how that's affecting us now? That's something very important too. Like, childhood trauma is no joke. And part of that childhood trauma is being disciplined by your parent who think they have a godly complex. And not
Mm-hmm.
only that, just that parent never speaking to you. And you
Yeah,
also feeling very confused because they're hurting you, but then they say they love you.
they're
So
supposed to be
there's a,
there. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so there's a confusion there. It's not clicking. And then we get into our um emotional relationships and we wonder why two and two isn't adding up.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this starts with the relationship you have with your parents. That's why I'm not certified, I'm not a psychologist, but when I speak to people, I always tell them, like, look at the relationship you have with your parents, and that will tell you a lot about yourself today, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
current or the relationship you had in the past. And that will tell you a lot about you and a lot about your romantic relationships as well.
Definitely. Honestly, guys, parenting is hard enough. And we're not, like Kedna said, we're not licensed. We're not licensed therapists or psychologists or anything like that. At least not yet. But
For real.
parenting is hard enough. Being a parent is tough. I know I have two children. I have two small children, so I know how tough it is. But I feel like we should just always be mindful and aware of what we are doing around our children and what we are doing to our children, how it's affecting them, and how it will affect them as they take grow and take on the world without you. Just being mindful, keep everything in mind. Like I personally can Kidna and a lot anybody who knows me, knows and loves me, knows how much I love to do research. And one of the
Mhm.
things that I've really gotten into is doing research on children, how to raise them, like the best way to raise them so that they can be successful and considerate little beings. Because believe it or not, there are so many inconsiderate beings in this world, and it rubs me the wrong way. It ruffles my feathers. I hate inconsiderate people, and I would hate for my children to be inconsiderate.
I love how you said that, sis. I actually wanted to share an experience. Sis, do you mind if I share this experience that you had with our father?
No, go ahead.
My sister and my father was beefing, and um, they just weren't seeing eye to eye. And one day, my father called my sister, and she said, "No, no, sorry." My father called me. I couldn't hear him.
Yeah.
So, you know what I'm about to say, sis?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
My sister knows the story I'm going to tell. And you know what, sis? That was so traumatic for me. Like, that's not even something that I wasn't the one getting beat, but that's one thing from my childhood that's very traumatic for me. Like, that's something I'll never forget.
The fact that
So,
you remembered it though just shows me how traumatic that was for you. Because it happened to
yeah,
me, so of course I remember it. But the fact
yeah,
that you remembered it and it didn't even happen to you, yeah, that just shows me. Go ahead, you can go
yeah.
ahead and finish telling the story.
Like,
Story
literally,
time.
it's so vivid in my mind, like it's crazy. But yeah, so I was in the kitchen doing the dishes and my father was calling me. I didn't hear him. I couldn't hear him. So my sister was like, Kedna, what did you say? What did you call me?
Somebody's calling you.
Oh, yeah.
I said,
My
Kidna, somebody's calling you.
and then I said, "What?"
And I
You know,
said,
sis,
somebody's calling you. But
yeah.
wait, prior to that, I told you and all of our siblings that I was no longer gonna call him dad and that I was gonna call him somebody. So when I say somebody, I'm talking about him. But I guess you forgot. You didn't remember, so you just like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and I didn't hear him calling me because the water was so loud and I was in the kitchen. I didn't hear. So when she said that the second time, it clicked. I was like, oh, yeah, she's talking about dad. So I said, okay. So I went into the room and then my father was like, go get your sister. I said, I don't know. I just felt like something was about to go down. I said, okay.
I
So
didn't think anything of it. I did not think I was gonna get in trouble.
no,
Honestly.
no, because why would he call me to go get you? Like that. so so I went to go get Stephanie. Oh my goodness. Stephanie went in the room. And I think this is why it was so traumatic for me because okay, so I don't know what happened when you went in the room, sis, if you want to explain.
From what I can remember is he asked me who's somebody, and why did I say somebody was calling Kedna when it was him? And I said, well, you're somebody. He said, why would you?
What, you said that?
Yeah, and then he was like, oh, why are you calling me somebody? I said, because you are a somebody. You're a person. You're a body. And then that's where it all went downhill from there. I got beat. He pulled out his belt and just started beating my butt. Like I had welts all over my body. I believe I was wearing a dress that day.
I'm a nosy person. I'm not nosy to where I'm not nosy to where like I care about things that doesn't pertain to me, but I'm nosy to where I was peeking. I don't know exactly what they were saying, but I visually was able to see what was happening. All I remember is that he took out the belt, he started whipping the hell out of Stephanie. And I was
Yeah.
scared, like I was so scared that I was shaking, watching.
But yeah, I mean, he beat me until I peed myself. Like he just kept going and going and going and going, and I ended up peeing myself. Like my bladder just said, "Fuck it," and just let
Yeah.
it go. So, and then after I peed myself, and this was in his room. After I peed myself, he called Kidnap to clean it up.
Yep. And I think that's why another reason why I was so traumatic. Okay, so I see her PR and stuff. I said, "Oh shoot!" And I was so scared. Like, and it's funny because when I was younger, I've always been kind of like a shaky person. Like my nervous system always been kind of shaky,
Mhm.
so I get scared very easily. So I remember shaking. I was so scared, like watching in the corner.
That's what you get for watching. Why are you watching?
Because I knew you was gonna get it. I knew you was gonna get it. But yeah, and then he called me. So automatically, oh my goodness, your legs ever been so wobbly? So I can barely walk to his room because I think I'm next. For some reason, I'm like, oh my, because don't sis, we used to get beat together. So don't
We
forget.
did.
So I'm like, bro, what the freak? And then I go in the room, he said, clean up the piss. And I'm like, what the hell? But I just did it. And I was like, what the F ever? Like,
Why
it was
would you clean?
crazy.
I didn't understand why he made you
Exactly.
clean it up. It made no sense to me.
That's that
But
God
who was I to
complex.
argue? Yeah, that's true.
That just shows like how abuse can get so like scary for a child. And most people don't consider it abuse, but it is a form of abuse. It is because it causes us to like invertly turn into ourselves, like go into our shells. We don't feel safe anymore. And at that particular time, like I did not feel safe. I was scared for my life. I was scared for my sister. And that's something I'll never forget. And if my sister and I like still spoke to our father, like that's something like don't get me wrong, I forgive him for it, but it's something I would never forget. And I probably
Yeah,
would bring it up. Funny enough, something you should keep in mind is that a lot of people, your child didn't forget what you did to them. They
that's
might
true.
not bring it up, but some children in their adulthood will, and you will feel crappy as hell. Like, and it's not even that they're trying to, but sometimes we're just trying to get an understanding. Like sometimes I'll talk to my mom about certain things, and I can see that she feels bad, but it's just like I'm just trying to get an understanding because this happened when I was younger, and I'm trying to still figure it out. So that's
Yeah.
something else to keep in mind, that you're most likely going to have to end up explaining yourself.
It's part of your healing too. Just asking
Yeah,
those questions like, hey, you remember that time XYZ? Why did you do that? And yeah, you're gonna
exactly.
feel crappy because they're gonna bring up some stuff that you used to do that you probably you're gonna regret doing by the time they're an adult, but you're gonna have to
Yeah,
explain yourself. Why did you do that?
exactly. And if your child doesn't do that, then they might still be going through it, believe it or not,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe they're in therapy for it, whatever the case may be. A lot of your actions doesn't go unnoticed. Somebody's always watching. And that's why I like how you were talking about being considerate and being mindful, because I feel like that's what it boils down to as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, Gems. Thank you so much for listening in to this conversation today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, all of the above, and leave feedback because we love reading your feedbacks. We love to engage with you guys. We love to talk to you guys about all of these different topics. So don't forget to comment. Don't forget to leave feedback. And until next time, Gems, love you guys.
And before we go, James, I would like for you guys to think about this question. How did the way that you were disciplined impact you growing up?
Mm.
And until next time, James. Bye.
Bye.